Now, I've talked about different bad cities and compared the worst states to one another, but one category that a lot of people want to know is which counties are the worst in all of America. Some states have various different ways to measure and define our counties. Like Alaska has boroughs and Louisiana has parishes. Connecticut, Rhode Island, and even parts of Massachusetts have counties, but they don't have actual functioning governments. So they're kind of like counties, but only in a geographical sense, not political ones. But overall, there are 3,141 different counties in all of our states combined. Some are big and some are small. Some are rich and some are safe, and many are not. The worst of these are the counties that we'll be discussing today. So, time to get out your atlas or your Thomas Brothers guide or even your phone. We're going to visit the worst possible counties you can live in the United States. We begin in the worst county that you can live in the state of West Virginia, in McDowell County. Now, I say the worst in West Virginia because, like several other states that we'll visit today, there are far more than just one really bad county in West Virginia. But in order to give a more complete look at the nation as a whole, for the most part, we're going to talk about only one county per state. McDowell County is here, located down at the far end of the state, right along the Virginia border, where it shares a border with Tazewell County. In this part of the country, it's hard to tell if you're actually in Virginia or West Virginia. It's a relatively small county, where there's only about 17,000 people. That's a massive drop from just 70 years ago when there were 100,000 people who lived here. So a lot of people are leaving. Most of that's because of technological advances in the coal industry. Back in 1950, this region was the nation's biggest coal-producing county, and one of every 6 people who lived here worked in coal. But mechanization and modern tech meant not as many people were needed to produce large amounts of coal. Many folks here, uneducated, had relied on coal jobs for their steady paychecks. Today, of those who remain, a third lives below the poverty line, and only 1 in 20 people manages to go to college. And like many other places we'll discuss, opioid overdoses are crushing whatever soul is left here. Our first and only visit to Florida brings us to Union County, a teeny little place of mostly woods and farmland about halfway between Gainesville and Jacksonville. It's actually the smallest county in Florida. It's also the 4th poorest county in the whole country, where the average person earns about $20,000 a year. It's also a terrible place because it's home to one of the largest maximum security prisons in the country, where they house people on death row. And there are 2 other prisons in this county, so a third of this county's 15,000 residents are locked up behind bars and are considered the worst criminals in the entire South. Union County also has the nation's highest death rate per capita in the country, not just because of the death row thing, but due to poverty and unhealthy lifestyles of its residents. The life expectancy for people who live in this county is 11 years younger than the national average, and 1 in 5 people lives in poverty. For a job, well, it's likely that you'd work at the prison, or if you're one of the 8% who actually has a college degree, perhaps you make the hour drive into the big city. There's only about 10,000 people in Wilcox County these days, which is a 10% drop from just a decade ago. Like the county we previously talked about, this little speck is way out in the Alabama woods, far from the state capital of Montgomery. 40% of folks here live below the poverty line, and half of kids live in poverty. For work, there's a paper mill and a copper manufacturing company, but the unemployment rate here is double the national average. Many of the communities way out here are super tiny, and some are completely abandoned. Cotton production peaked ages ago, and railroads built bigger and faster lines which bypassed these communities. The lumber industry also skipped town a long time ago too. Many of Wilcox County's communities look like time forgot them. Scattered throughout this county are churches, gas stations, and bait shops, but some places around here weren't even important enough that Google's street team even ventured back that far to explore them. Now, New Mexico has a lot of poverty, especially in areas which are home to Native American reservations, even the ones with casinos inside of them. McKinley County is home to a large Native American reservation. In fact, a big chunk of land up here in the Four Corners where New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and Utah meet is set aside for Native American reservations. As such, 75% of this county's population is Native American. The average person here earns about $1,000 a month, and 40% of this county's 71,000 people lives in poverty. That's a lot. McKinley is also one of 38 counties in the country where English isn't the primary language. Half the population speaks Navajo, and 10% speak Zuni. It's dangerous here too. This county has a crime rate that's double the national average. Man, driving around these county roads reminds me of my gal growing up, Val. I miss Val. Some good times we had running around these county roads way back in the 1930s. Maybe I'll call on Val and see if she's still in the area. An hour southeast of the Memphis metro area and right along the mighty Mississippi is teeny tiny Lee County, home to only 8,800 people and dropping by the week. The population here has dropped nearly 20% in the last decade alone. 1 in every 3 kids here never finishes high school, which is a big reason 20% of the population doesn't have health care and why folks bring in about $2,000 a month in income. In today's America, that's not going to be enough to get you much. This area is considered part of the Arkansas Delta, named after Confederate General Robert E. Lee. The county was a big deal in the old days as a slave-operated cotton producer. The eastern region of Arkansas along the Mississippi has been called the deepest of the Deep South. When cotton-picking machines emerged in the 1940s, it meant cotton-picking workers were out of work. Now, you see large fields, large machines, battered towns, and few people. There's still money to be made here, but it's mostly large-scale farms which continue to produce cotton, as well as rice and soybeans. Catfish farming is also a thing in this region. One highlight, Lee County is home to Jones Barbecue, the most award-winning restaurant in the state. This area also has a rich musical history. It's kind of fitting that blues music had such a stronghold here. So driving around back here, I was able to find the house Val grew up in. Maybe I'll take a peek and see if she's around. I doubt it. She probably married some jock. I do miss her though. Old Val. One of 2 Mississippi counties to make the list, Coahoma County lies on the other side of the river from Lee County. It's pretty much the most dangerous county in the entire state of Mississippi. The county seat of Clarksdale had over 150 violent crimes a couple years ago, and with a population of about 16,000, that means 1 violent crime for every 100 residents. 35% of residents in Clarksdale live below the poverty line, and the average person brings in about $1,000 a month. And 1 in 5 residents are not high school graduates. It's a mostly agriculture-based community, Coahoma County is. It's part of the Mississippi Delta, which again, lost a big chunk of the population when machines took over the production. I mean, this part of Mississippi was once the golden buckle on the cotton belt. Then when machines took over, those jobs went away. This area also turns out musicians of prominence. Ike Turner, Tennessee Williams, Conway Twitty, and Nate Dogg all hail from Coahoma County, Mississippi. Some of the deepest pockets in Louisiana are extremely poor, and Madison Parish is no different. Another county along the Mississippi River. Are we seeing a pattern here? This was too a former cotton producer and pecan farming region that's seen better times. They're losing about 10 people every month from this county, which might not seem like a big deal, but when there's only 11,000 people left, it started to become pretty noticeable. Today, the unemployment rate's twice the national average, where 1 in 3 parish residents lives below the poverty line, where many people live on about $800 a month. This is about as rural as it gets in America. There's only 5 real communities in this entire parish. Waverly, Omega, and Ashley are so small you can't even find actual pictures on the internet. Here's the 3rd biggest place here, a place called Mound. If you squint, you can see an actual residence. There's a place called Richmond with 500 people, and there's a lot going on there. And Tallulah, which has a Sonic, a KFC, and a Popeyes. Good for you, Tallulah. Okay, so earlier we mentioned that there are some states with a handful of bad counties in them. Statistically, Kentucky actually has 5 of the top 10 worst counties in America, but we couldn't just make a video that talks only about Kentucky counties, because that would be repetitive, so we left the others out. But McCreary County is the worst county of all bad Kentucky counties. Way down here near the Tennessee state line, this is another example of how catastrophic poverty is concentrated in Appalachian counties where coal and timber were once dominant industries. 40% of the county's 17,000 residents lives in poverty now that 24 coal mines have shut down. Half of all households bring in less than $20,000 a year, and more than half of residents live on welfare alone. The 3 biggest communities here all have less than 2,000 people, and as you can see, there really isn't a lot going on here. Today, the only adequate jobs are working in the county courthouse or teaching in public schools. Kentucky contains the poorest lily-white counties in America, where there's very little farmland. 80% of the county is federally protected land, and most of the rest is hills filled with bedrock. Okay, so I'm inside Val's house. I can still smell her perfume. I'm gonna go through her stuff and see if I can figure out what she's been up to since I last saw her when we were 18. That was ages ago. Old Val. Where are you, Val, and what have you been up to? Holmes County, Mississippi is actually a county that isn't along the Mississippi River, but it's still rural. Historically, you could get a home here for $73,000, but according to leading real estate website Zillow, there's only 1 home for sale here currently, and they're asking $875,000 for it. What the? It looks like something Forrest Gump grew up in. But $875,000 for a house way out on the sticks in rural, poverty-stricken Mississippi? That's a lot to ask, especially for a place where half the people live in poverty and where 1 in 3 households, like the whole house, make less than 10 grand a year. That's the highest rate of poverty of any county in the nation. So who can afford this?
Did you know the average cost per acre in Mississippi is $4,000?
Clearly, I would not know that, Mappy. I guess that at $4,000 an acre, this place should cost like $1.2 million, but the land doesn't look farmable. No answer for that one? Okay, so anyways, this is pretty much the poorest non-Native American reservation place in the country. And speaking of Native American reservations, we come to our last worst county in the nation, Oglala County, South Dakota, where 95% of the population is Native American. Half the folks here live in poverty, which is the highest rate in the country, and 60% of the population lives on food stamps, which is also the highest rate in the country. 1 in 4 people doesn't have a job, and 4 in 10 people here don't even have health care. Surprisingly, to me, 12% of the population here actually attended college. This whole county falls entirely within the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in southern South Dakota, way down near Nebraska. The average person here only lives at the age of 66, which is also the worst in the country. For reference, 66 years old is more in line with developing nations like Pakistan and Tanzania. Just sad and eye-opening. So that's it, our worst counties in America. A lot of former cotton-producing areas and coal mining towns and Native American reservations. It can be kind of eye-opening to see how isolated and poverty-stricken a lot of these places are here in America, a first world country. So don't take for granted your life. You should be grateful because there's a lot of people living in conditions that you can't really identify with. Uh-oh, here comes Val's husband. I better go. There's places where there just isn't. There's places where you can't see it. There's places that want to quit it. It's like we don't care. There's places that used to be great. There's places where the hope is too late. There's places hidden in our states. It's like we don't care. Hey guys, if you learned something new about America or what it's like to live in America, great. You should think about subscribing and turning on your notifications. You can also click one of these videos or playlists for more. You can also now buy my songs on iTunes and other formats. Click the link in the description. Thanks for watching. And remember, while we all might have different views, we should all be nice to each other and try to make the U.S. a better place in a positive way.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.